Welcome to Ask the Attorney. I'm Susan Tierney, and this is Scott Horne. And today we're going to talk about a number of things. One in particular is note sales. But before we get into that, we need to know, now that you have the real estate and you've set it up properly, what now? What does it take to get to that note sale? Does it start way back in the inception of finding the property? Is it the thought process? What is it?
Well, one of the things we've always talked about is you need to know what it is you're going to do with the house once you buy it.
Right.
And you want to get this pre-planned out. And we've talked about this before. So when you buy the house and take it down, you have a plan. Mm-hmm. Now, if your plan is to create an owner finance note with the potentiality of selling that note, you need to think about how you want to originate that note, right? Mm-hmm. And, when we're talking to a home buyer, so let's say we've already bought our property, and now what we're doing is we're talking to a home buyer. First and foremost, what I want the marketplace to understand is when we're selling a home with seller financing, yeah, we're selling the house. That's the obvious part, right? Mm-hmm. But what are we really selling? Because if we have a home buyer who has the ability to obtain financing through a mortgage company or a bank, they can pretty much go out and pick and choose what they want within their affordability, right?
Right.
Okay. But if you have somebody who cannot get that, but they can make a payment and they have enough money for a down payment, what are we really doing? And it's remembering that what we're selling in those scenarios is we're really selling financing. We're selling, first and foremost, I think, is an opportunity for someone who can't get a loan a chance to buy a house. That is huge in that thought process. We are selling a reasonable, and that's one of the key words, reasonable down payment. And it's recognizing what the market has. What I have seen, at least in the Texas marketplace, about 70% of home buyers have a 10% down payment or so, plus some closing mm-hmm. costs. And keep in mind, the average down payment out there in the marketplace for FHA is like 3.5%, not 10. Well, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population, they have about a 20% down payment or so. Okay. And there's about 10% has something in excess of that. So we want to be reasonable, and it's all about timing, because you want to get a buyer in the property fairly quickly. If you're asking too much for it, too large a down payment, it may just sit, right? Mm-hmm. But we're selling not only just a reasonable down payment, we're selling a reasonable monthly payment. If you oversell your property, if the monthly payment is too high, are you setting your buyer up to fail? And if your goal is to sell that note into the marketplace somewhere, and you set your buyer up to fail, what's going to happen?
They're not
yeah.
They won't make the payments, and you can't sell the note.
Or you sell the note, and
you don't get as much.
They foreclose on it, and either you may have to buy the house back, could be some of the revisions in there, mm-hmm. or things of that nature. So I want people to understand that as you're structuring a transaction, it's not about trying to get the absolute max out of the deal. You don't have to do well. Take care of your buyer. And if your goal is to sell a note on the back end, take care of that back end note buyer. And that will allow you to stay in business so much longer. And that's truly how you make money at the end of the day.
Okay. So on the sale to the homeowner or the home buyer, you're selling the property. Yeah. And you're thinking long-term in the back of your head, I want to sell this note. Is there anything you would do differently?
Well, first off, if we're going to go out and originate a loan to a home buyer, so if I'm going to sell you a home, Susan, first off, I need to understand who I am. Yeah, I'm the property owner. That's the easy part, right? Mm-hmm. But in this case, I'm the seller, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm more than a seller. In a traditional retail transaction, I may just be the seller because Bank of America or Wells Fargo may be the lender or some other mortgage company. Mm-hmm. There might be another loan servicer out there. There might be another underwriter or a processor, whatever it might be. But in an owner finance transaction, I have several roles, and they're all under one roof here. I'm the seller, I'm the lender, mm-hmm. I'm the underwriter, and truly I'm the sole decision maker.
Right.
There's no third party out there. Sometimes, although I'm not the title company or the closing agent, we want to make certain we're delivering good title to our buyer, right?
Right.
And so we wear many hats. And so as I'm going through that and recognizing those things, as I recognize what the aspects are of me selling a home, the opportunity, the down payment, the monthly payment, I need to make sure my terms are reasonable. And I need to know what the marketplace may seek. And think about this. If you wanted to buy a mortgage from somebody, do you want to buy a 3% interest rate loan, or do you want to buy a 10% interest rate loan? You want to buy a 10%. Do you want to buy that at face value, or at maybe a discount of some type?
Okay.
And how do we get there? What does that mean? And so there's a thought process that the marketplace has to learn to go through in structuring a transaction. It's not just about selling the house up front. Now, by the way, if you want to hold on to it long term, absolutely. It's great. Make your deal and move. But if you're looking for an exit strategy to try to find a way to find that sweet spot in the note marketplace, you've got to know what the note marketplace is looking for, what is out there, and how to put that deal together.
Right. Okay, so then let's jump right in. Starting with, holding and selling notes, okay? And obviously you have to have an understanding of the note marketplace. And if you're a new investor, you don't really, it took me a long time to understand what the note was and what the note marketplace is. And we've been through some things on notes lately. And, what is it that the market seeks? The note buyer, what do they want?
Well, they seek a lot of things, but you can go online, you can make phone calls. There are some national buyers, smaller buyers. You can find forums, and you can get a feel. Now, obviously, someone who's buying a note is buying it for investment, right? If you're buying for investment, you're looking for return on capital. Everybody has a different number. What is that return on capital you're looking for? Is it 6%? I would love to find those guys. Is it 9%? Is it 12%? 16%? Sometimes big money wants bigger returns, but not always.
Right.
Sometimes the little guys are just looking for a reasonable return on capital in that instance. And so it is getting a feel, and I hate to use that word feel, but that's really what it is, of what the market is looking at, because there's no direct or definitive answer.
Right, because each note buyer is different.
Yes,
and
they
they
are.
all have different criteria. What about so I get that they're looking for good loan to value, but what about the property itself?
Okay.
Are they looking for something that's been totally remodeled, or something with somebody that's been in there forever and just pays and it's kind of a POS, or what?
Well, let's talk about the property and the loan to value, because they kind of tie together a little bit. So I have seen in my career so many investors who, I hate to use the phrase lipstick on a pig, that's what they do. They'll go into a property, they'll do as little work to it as possible. They'll try to sell it for 110, 20% of value and create a note and then sell that note in the marketplace. When, because the repairs they did doesn't increase the value, in fact, it probably diminishes the value somehow. And the question becomes, what will that note buyer do to analyze a transaction? I am much more the fan of doing the repairs to that property correctly. Do what it needs. That doesn't mean going over the top, but at the same time, it doesn't mean doing almost nothing. And I've seen them both, unfortunately. And in the investor world, we learn how to rehab a property. And so often new investors, when they get involved, they overspend too much money, put too much money in the property that they don't have to. But at the same token, we don't want them to go in there and put too little in. You don't leave holes in the carpet or in the walls and this kind of stuff and try to pass it off as being a marketable property. But there are people that do that because they think they can maximize dollars. Those are the people who are going to be in this industry a very short time frame because the note marketplace tracks it and understands it out there. So I think it's very important that you deliver a reasonably good product to that note buyer.
Okay.
Now, when you get there though, that reasonably good product affects your loan to value, right?
Right.
Investors are going to look at what is a reasonable loan to value. They may want an appraisal on the property. It might be a full appraisal. It might just be a drive-by.
The note buyer wants
The note
that.
buyer.
Okay.
It might be a desktop appraisal. And there's different levels of appraisals based upon what they're looking for. And then based upon that, they may have a particular yield, but they look for a loan to value. So in other words, if a house will appraise for $100,000, does that note buyer really want to buy that house for a $100,000 note? Do they want to pay you 100% for that note? Probably not. Why? Well, imagine for a minute you bought, or I held your note and I wanted to sell it to a note buyer. And the house appraises for 100 and my note to you is for 100. And remember, we can sell our seller finance properties for more than what it actually appraises for. So I might have sold you the home for 110%. You put 10% down and I carried back a $100,000 loan. Well, the risk factor there is what if you default? Because bad things happen to good people all the time, and you default in making your payments. Well, the note buyer, they get the house back. They're into it at full price. Now they're behind in payments because you didn't make the last 2 or 3 or 4 payments. They have to get you out of the house. Maybe you moved out voluntarily. Maybe there's an eviction or a foreclosure process. They have to usually go in there and do some renovations to it. So automatically, they're going to lose 15%, maybe 20% right off the top. And so note buyers are looking for a reasonable loan to value based on many factors. Who is the note? Who is the property owner today? What did they may not look at your credit, but they may. How much money did you put down? What's the interest rate? What kind of processing is behind it? They look at the whole package in making a decision.
How important is the origination of the loan to the process?
Well, that's huge, because what you don't want to do is put someone in a home that can't afford the house, right? That's where this Dodd-Frank Act came from. So to help us not oversell a property to somebody who really can't afford it. What you don't ever want to do is set somebody up to fail. I get it. Things happen down the road. Did anybody expect COVID to happen and people to lose their jobs and things like that? No. But things happen. Sometimes there are big issues like that. Sometimes it just might be an illness that the homeowner can't control.
Right.
A job transfer they can't control. But what a note buyer is going to look for is, how is this loan originated? Did the buyer go through proper processing? I go back 30 years ago, and when I first got started in the business, I did not know we needed to get all of this financial information on a buyer. I just thought, hey, you tell me you got enough money to make the payment, you have a down payment, I'm going to sell you the house. I didn't know we needed a full application, tax returns, to verify past rental, verify employment, get copies of W-2s, copies of bank statements, etc. We found out the hard way, and so we started doing that, and it helped to maximize our saleability of our notes.
A better buyer.
It is.
A more qualified buyer.
But we were able to demonstrate that the buyer was a better buyer. Now today, we come in with the Dodd-Frank Act, the SAFE Act, which is now we are processing the buyer through the 𝐟𝐺, as you said. Yeah.
Right.
And so it's a different world today, but it's the same thing.
Right.
Deliver a good product, the property, deliver a good buyer who at the time you sold it,
Who can validate they have the ability to pay.
That's it.
And then a pretty RMLO package. Will a note buyer buy a note on an owner finance transaction if you have not processed them through an RMLO?
You know, in the past, the answer would be yes. This is probably before 2010, but all the compliance things come into focus today.
Yeah.
With the CFPB and these regulatory issues that are out there, I truly believe that people who want to buy notes, and we try to educate the note marketplace also, even the individual buyer. A lot of people buy notes in their IRAs. Understand that, but they need to know what the rules are. I know a lot of the IRA companies try to educate them on that, which is great. You want an educated note buyer. Obviously, your larger corporate entities that buy notes and portfolio those, they're probably pretty savvy at that. But yes, they want to know who that buyer is. They want to see it processed, because when it's processed, they know it's going to be compliant. And unfortunately, we have moved into this compliance world where everything is now hypersensitive. We have the Dodd-Frank Act to deal with, which we've discussed. They've got the SAFE Act, which we've discussed. There is RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedure Act, which applies to all mortgages that we've discussed. And all that blends in today to creating, you made the word a pretty package. It's a pretty package. It's a compliant package in that instance.
Okay. Is a down payment, a note buyer wants to see that somebody has skin in the game and put a big down payment
Oh, heck
down?
yes.
Okay.
You know, I will tell you that we have sold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into the secondary marketplace, as we call that. And the secondary marketplace is really the marketplace that would buy the paper. And think about this. If you own your own homestead, the great odds are you're not with the same company that originated your loan.
Right.
It usually got sold the very next day to a longer term note buyer, and it may have gotten sold again and again, who knows. So in the private note marketplace, the same thing happens out there. Down payment is important. One of the things I learned many, many years ago, and I was taught by some of the best guys in this industry, there is a direct correlation between the size of the down payment, so skin in the game, the quality of the property, because if you put a buyer, even with a down payment in a bad property, are they going to want to stay there? Maybe they can't repair it properly and they want out. And so many investors aren't willing to work with them, so they just leave. They don't care about getting foreclosed on sometimes. But you want to have those things. Validating the down payment is important as well. I will tell you, I have seen people in my parking lot giving a home buyer cash. They come in to sell the house to the home buyer with owner financing. The home buyer uses the cash for the down payment, which we don't like taking cash in the closing. And it's all to set the deal up so they can then sell the note, sometimes even simultaneously to the back-end note buyer, when in fact they're defrauding the note buyer, because that buyer never had the down payment. Anytime you're dealing with money, things like that can happen, fraud can happen, we all know that. And there are people who are unscrupulous, they do things of that nature. And obviously we don't support that. We want to discourage that, but it does happen. And there are reasons, such as in transactions that we put together, we want to verify and validate. And that's where things like the RMLO, the Residential Mortgage Loan Originator, and the loan processing is so valid, because it helps to show that they actually do have the money available. Or if they're going to borrow it from a relative, great, we can document that. There's nothing wrong with that. Where did it come from? Is it legit? But then you made the other comment, can they afford the monthly payment?
Right.
That is huge, so yes.
Okay. What's a reasonable return on investment that a note buyer would expect?
Oh gosh, you know, that's almost like as far as east is from west, but I think it's a little bit more narrow than that. You know, you can find unsophisticated people that might want lower ones in some instance. And by the way, if you've got a phenomenal loan to value, let's say that you have a 50% loan to value, the note's $50,000 and the property's worth $100,000 a day. Could you sell that note at a lower return, maybe 7 or 8%? Maybe. Why? Because if something was to go negative, then there's a big potential upside for the note buyer, not only for protection, but to make more money downstream, right? Okay. On the other hand, if you're selling a note that might only have 10 or 20% equity in it, so let's just use an example we used earlier, a $110,000 sale, $100,000 note on a property that's worth $100,000. I think there's going to be a certain loan to value that an investor's going to look at. That might be a 20% discount or buying it for 80 cents on the dollar. That's going to depend, is it seasoned, unseasoned, or how seasoned is it? And by seasoning, I mean, how many monthly payments has the note buyer made? 1, 12, 24, 36? How have they paid? All that weighs into that decision process.
And have they paid on time?
Right.
What is a note, what time period will a note buyer want to start at? 6 months of payments, a year,
Well,
2 years?
You know, I've been able to negotiate some at 1. The marketplace is usually 12 on a minimum.
Okay,
And then the more payments you have, sometimes you get better rates.
Yeah.
They'll buy it with a lesser discount. Now, going back to a return on investment, or a yield as they call it, what I see out there is typically 9 to 16% based upon who's buying it, the situation, the loan to value, risk factors and things of that nature. It varies. But the smaller private individual may be a little bit lower return. Your more savvy investors are looking for a higher return, and that's usually going to be somewhere between 12 and 16% probably is a guess.
okay,
But the marketplace is variable.
right. Okay, so what do note buyers buy? What kind of notes?
Well, I mean, if you're buying a private note, there are so many ways that a note buyer can purchase that note. You can buy what is called the whole note, the entire note. So going back to the example, this $100,000 loan, I'll pay you $80,000 to buy your $100,000 note. Okay, I might pay you $75,000 because the loan to value is not there, the value is not there. Maybe I didn't quite like your processing good enough and those kind of things. And so I want more of a discount to protect myself, right? I might want to buy a certain number of payments. Maybe we call that a partial sometimes. I might buy the first 180 payments of a 360 note. Why? Well, because in the first 15 years, you're paying mostly interest and not principal.
Okay, what if there's a first lien, a second lien, and a third lien on their property? Could they just come in and buy one lien?
Well, they could. I think most note buyers want to be in first lien position.
Okay,
I have seen note buyers buy seconds and thirds. Usually when those kind of things happen, there's a bigger discount, you know, because their risk goes up. They're going to want to know for a fact there's some way to validate that the other liens ahead of them are getting paid timely, such as a loan servicer. And by discounting their lien more, for instance, if I was a third lien holder, I maybe want to be at 50 cents on the dollar or less on that because I have more risk. It's going to go back to the things we talked about earlier. Loan to value. How good was the deal processed? What does the note buyer, the note maker, the homeowner, look like on paper? All those things are important. You know, you can buy parts of payments. There's many ways to structure a deal. There's one out there, I call it bifurcating the note.
yes, that's
Where
my
you can
next
create
question.
a first and a second, let's say. where you-
Bifurcating means just splitting it in half or in any percentage?
We've done, everything is open. We've done 90-10, 85-15, 80-20, 70-30.
Is that ever confusing to the owner of the home when all of a sudden they have to send one portion to this note buyer and another portion to another note buyer? Is that a hard thing to sell to?
Well, it's not necessarily a hard sell, but problems can happen
Okay,
because they get confused.
right,
Oftentimes, in today's world, oftentimes there's loan servicers.
okay.
And so they make one payment to the loan servicer, and the servicer breaks it up into two payments.
Okay,
That could be the easy solution.
okay,
But a lot of times it doesn't, and it does get confusing. And you've got to make sure that they understand it and maybe stay on top of things a little bit more.
okay. So, and I know we do this where we'll sell off a large portion and keep the rest, and we'll have a higher interest rate on what we keep.
Well, you can do things of that nature. It's just how you structure the deal. And
Okay.
every deal can be structured differently because remember, what do you think the note market is going to pay you for, let's say, that 80% loan? Will they pay you face value? Will they pay you only 90 or 80% of the 80%? And again, they're going to look at all of these variables involved. You know, there are some companies who are highly sophisticated and have charts that says, we'll do X, Y, Z. You don't find that too often. They're going to say, what do you have? And then based upon all the things they get a chance to research, from loan to value, to your pay history, to the seasoning, the interest rate on the loan, how well you paid along the way, all these variables weigh in to what is it I'm buying, an 80% first lien on a property that is where I have 20% equity, or maybe today I've got 40% equity. Will weigh into the decision process. But the key really is to understand that there are variables out there.
Right.
There are ways to structure your deal to start with, at least, that will give you some opportunity.
Right.
And
Properly originating that loan is huge.
It is. But then every note seller, so if I'm going to sell my note to somebody, they have different needs also. They may need cash today as opposed to monthly payments tomorrow. And so you've got to look at all these variables to make that decision. So it's not something to just walk into blindly. It's knowing, what did I buy the property for? What's my basis in it? What did I sell it for? If I bifurcate it, or if I sell the whole note, what does that look like? What are my needs today? What do I think the market's going to pay me for this? So when I get my offer from my note buyer, I can either negotiate a little or not at all, I don't know. But all those things are going to weigh into the equation, and then the investor makes that final decision. But there are many moving parts to it,
Right.
that are not too difficult to understand.
Right.
But it's, as we said earlier, understanding the note marketplace, what they're looking for, how to originate my note, what kind of an average yield do they look for. You're never going to put your finger exactly what that might be.
Right.
How do I accomplish my maximum return? Do I need cash today, cash tomorrow? What is it? And for me, that's kind of the fun part of the business, is I like all those moving parts and the structuring and the financial
Right.
side of this kind of stuff.
There's a lot to learn, and I hear a lot about non-performing notes. I saw a webinar come up, and it said, why, the best deal in note sales is buying the non-performing notes. To me, that would be the biggest headache in the note sales. Who would want to buy? Because then you have to get them out of the house, because if they're not paying the rent, why would anybody want to buy the note?
Well, they're not paying rent, they're paying a mortgage.
The mortgage, I'm sorry.
But,
if they're 3 or 4 months out,
a
who could
non-performing
sell
note's
that
going to
note?
be 4 months behind, 6 months behind, 1 or 2 years behind, who knows? Secondly, people who buy non-performing notes are going to look at the deal very similar to what I just described. They're not looking at the borrower right now because they already know you're in default.
Right.
You're a non-issue. So now they're going to look at the property, its value, what can I buy this note for? So maybe, let's assume for a minute, the house is worth $100,000 and you have a $90,000 loan on the property and it's non-performing. I already know that I may have to go through a foreclosure. I may have to evict you. The house may be in bad shape. I have to resell it. So now I'm going to want a pretty steep discount on
Right.
that. Now let's assume for a moment, because of all these variables, I go in and I'll pay $60,000 to buy that non-performing $90,000 note. Well, what if I can come to you, the owner, the property lives there, and restructure your loan to work for you? That fits in your situation. Maybe you had a bad spell for the last 6 months or a year that caused you to fall behind. Maybe it was COVID that caused those things that happened, or whatever it might be. But you're back on your feet again. And by me working with you to restructure that loan more appropriately, it becomes performing.
So
Boom, I just made a big home
So
run,
do
right?
they have to buy the non-performing before they can get a chance to talk to the owner of the note? They can't,
Probably in most cases, yes.
okay.
You're going to have to control the deal. Now, another thing that we subscribe to up here is, you always negotiate from a position of control. Talk is cheap, right? It's all about action. And so as we're talking, maybe, I'm going to start my pre-foreclosure work and get it going. I'm not going to stop any of that while we're negotiating. And maybe that's my, speak softly but carry a big stick type moment, right? where you know this is coming, maybe you want to do this, maybe you can, but I'm not going to let you drag me out for weeks or months, or Lord, like some of these banks have done recently, for years without payments coming in.
Right. But even especially in some states, look at what Arizona takes 6 months to get somebody out of a house.
Yep.
So if you're in that state and you're buying a non-performing note, you have to think, okay, it's going to take me 6 months of no more payments. You kind of analyze it that way?
It's absolutely you do. It's not only that. Has any prior notices been sent that might shorten that time frame? Along the way, if I have to go through an eviction process, what does that look like? What if you file bankruptcy? Have you already moved out of the house or not? A lot of people abandon the homes and they're just sitting there. And so you need to know the real estate, know what's going on, have boots on the ground who can see things.
Exactly.
It can be hugely profitable.
Really? To me,
But it
you'd
can
have
also
to
be
buy it on 10 cents on the dollar to make it worth your
Well, not quite that
effort.
low. But again, if I have to go through a foreclosure process, an eviction process, a repair process, if I bought that deal for 60 cents on the dollar and I got to put 10 cents back into it or 15 cents, it might still be a heck of a good deal. But it's learning how to do it, knowing your costs and expenses, and once again, properly analyzing the transaction.
Right.
But no, here in Texas, about 2 months to foreclose on an owner-occupant.
Right. Here's easy.
As you
but
said,
boy,
Arizona,
and
6
Illinois,
months.
I hear is horrible, and I don't know. When I saw that non-performing, that's the best way to buy a note, I'm thinking.
Well, there are
And
some.
whose eyes is that?
Well, no, there are some lenders who they don't want to go through this headache. They don't want to mess with it.
Right.
And so now this $100,000 valued home that has a $90,000 loan, maybe you're buying it for 60, but maybe you're buying that note for 50 or 40 cents on the dollar. And all of a sudden, yes, you take on the headache to do all the legwork and the headache work, etc., instead of that big bank or big institution. But yet at the same time, you can be rewarded very well.
Right.
It's everything weighs out. By the way, what you'll find in that industry is this: there are those deals that work out fantastic, that are home runs. There are those deals that do not work out, and they are loss leaders. And somewhere you meet in the middle. And that's what I've seen and heard has historically been the average. So you win some, you lose some, but normally you wind up in the middle. As long as that middle is where you want to be, they can be great deals.
Right. Now, how do you find a note buyer? Just Google note buyers, or maybe go to your real estate clubs?
Well, I think real estate clubs is a great mechanism to do it. You know, we work with a group here in the DFW area with Eddie Speed and the Note School. They have they're note buyers. They know note buyers. You can look in and Google out private note buyers, and you're going to come across, as I said, corporate entities and institutions, financial institutions that buy this. There may be smaller groups that buy this. Sometimes you have to cultivate your note buyers through a lot of the IRA companies and whatnot out there. And of course, to do that, you have to go to their seminars, because they're not going to give you that information on their IRA clients. You have to go to their seminars and meet people. And you start to develop relationships, and slowly your names get out on people who buy and things
I mean, you
of that
just
nature.
went last weekend to the Note Expo, and you met note buyers all over the country.
Sure.
So they're everywhere, and they're always looking to buy notes.
There are. And this is a business that is in resurgence. It was huge back in the 80s and 90s. Obviously, in the subprime era, things slowed down a little bit. Didn't go away. Now, when the real estate crash hit, it totally was decimated.
Yeah.
But it is coming back again, and it's awesome. But you know, along the way, I just want to reiterate this: they're understanding how to create the note, what you're looking at, how to look at your buyer, and structure that deal properly is so important. Understanding the note marketplace. It's going to take years to be an expert in any of these things. You don't have to be an expert at everything. You just need a good knowledge base to get close and then go.
Right.
It's kind of like hand grenades and drive-in movies, right?
Yeah.
Let's get close. So you go through those processes and look at those deals. And then it's about learning that business and making money is a long-term scenario.
Right.
I like to cultivate my buyers.
Yeah.
I like to provide a quality product because I want to be able to go back to them time and time and time again
Right.
without having to hunt down new note buyers every single time
Yeah.
that can wear you out.
Yeah.
I do try to maximize my dollars by analyzing different note buyers in the marketplace out there. But once you've got 1 or 2 or 3 quality people
Right.
who can handle whatever the volume is you create,
Yeah.
stick with it.
Yeah.
Turn over a good product to them.
Right.
Take care of them. Do the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, there was I know I was talking about this earlier, but our good friend, I say good friend, our old circus boy, P.T.
P.T. Barnum
said, "A sucker is born
every minute."
every minute." So, can you find somebody that will pay you more money for a cheap deal? Sure. Do you think they're going to come back and buy a deal
Right.
again? No.
Right. It's all about longevity and doing the right thing and taking care of people.
It is. But I will just close with this, Susan. This is a phenomenal industry. It has what got me into our industry so well and elevated me. I guess when I was young and doing this, I was just trying to make a living, trying to find a way to do things. But it allowed me to cut out the middleman, cut out realtors sometimes, cut out the mortgage companies. Yeah, we got to use a title company because we have to have a title policy usually on our security instrument. But you make money sometimes by saving money.
Right.
And it allowed us to turn a lot of volume that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Right.
Not everybody's cut out for it. I get it. It's a great industry though. It's taking the time to learn it and then become a student of it
Yeah.
and see how it fits
Yes.
within your business model.
That's true. Just really research and understand it. Like, I would be afraid to go out and sell my notes without you, because I would feel like I would be taken advantage of, because
Just
you
like
gotta know.
investors take advantage of note buyers, I think note buyers can take advantage of investors.
Absolutely.
So again, as we always say, knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. Okay, that was great. Thank you, Scott. And check out the Owner Finance Network for more Ask the Attorney episodes on theownerfinancenetwork.com.
Thanks.